In the quiet Earth town of Eldridge, David Langley's evening was unlike any other. The soft hum of his computer filled his small, cluttered study as he pored over astronomical data. A linguist by profession and an amateur astronomer by passion, David had always been drawn to the mysteries of the universe. Suddenly, his backyard observatory's alarm blared, a signal that his array had detected an anomaly. Frowning, David switched to his telescope feed. There, streaking across the sky, was a brilliant object, burning more brightly than any meteor he'd ever tracked. "Must be a satellite," David muttered, adjusting his glasses. But so close and slow. Grabbing a flashlight and a jacket, he hurried outside into the chill of the night, following the trajectory as the object descended toward the nearby woods. His heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. As David reached the tree line, the ground trembled slightly under his feet. Through the thicket, he could see a faint glow. Pushing past low branches, he came upon a small clearing. There, nestled among scorched earth, was a sleek, metallic craft unlike any terrestrial design he'd seen. "Wow," David gasped, circling the craft at a safe distance. It was oval, with smooth, seamless surfaces and a soft, pulsating light emanating from within. The hatch suddenly hissed open, startling him. David stepped back, shining his flashlight towards the opening. A figure emerged, lithe and tall, with iridescent skin that shimmered under the light. Her eyes, large and expressive, reflected a cautious curiosity as they met his. "Hello," David ventured, lowering his flashlight. "Are you all right?" The alien stared at him, tilting her head slightly, clearly not understanding. Remembering his pocket translator, David quickly typed a greeting and held it out. The device whirred and spoke the words in a soft, electronic tone. The alien's eyes widened, and she responded in a melodic, flowing language. The translator crackled and interpreted. "Greetings, Earth Dweller. I require refuge." David blinked in astonishment. "Refuge? From what?" "Pursuers," she replied, her voice tinged with urgency. "I am Elira. I cannot return. It is not safe." "Okay, Elira," David said, processing her plight. "You can stay with me. Let's get you somewhere safe." He led her back to his house, sneaking glances as they walked. Elira's presence was surreal, her every movement graceful and measured. Once inside, David offered her a seat. "So, you're a princess?" he asked, recalling her earlier words. "Yes, in your terms, it would be similar," Elira confirmed, looking around the modest living room with an air of polite curiosity. "And you flew all this way alone?" David continued, fascinated. "To seek sanctuary," Elira nodded. "Your world is not known to my people. Here, I can hide." "Well, you're safe here for now," David reassured her, his mind racing. He thought about his next steps, about contacting authorities, but something stopped him. She had trusted him, a stranger on a strange planet. "Thank you, David Langley," Elira said, her voice soft but firm. "In my world, to give refuge is to vow protection. Do you vow to protect me?" David hesitated only a moment before extending his hand, a human gesture of agreement he hoped she understood. "I vow it." Elira placed her hand in his, her touch light and cool. "Then I am in your care." As they sat, the room filled with a comfortable silence, both contemplating the bizarre twist of fate that had brought them together. David knew his life was about to change, but as he looked at the alien princess seeking refuge in his home, he couldn't muster any regret. David Langley, a language professor and amateur astronomer, was in his small home observatory in Eldridge when his equipment began buzzing unexpectedly. It was late, and the quiet hum of the night was suddenly interrupted by a series of alerts from his monitors. "What in the world?" David muttered, peering at the screen, which showed an unknown object descending rapidly towards Earth. He grabbed his jacket and flashlight, heading outside into the crisp night air. The trajectory suggested it would land nearby. As he crossed the field behind his house, his neighbor, Tom, a retired pilot and occasional stargazing companion, called out to him from his backyard. "David, did you see that?" "Tom, yes, I'm heading there now. It's close, over by the Miller's old farm," David replied, waving him over. Together, they hurried towards the site, their flashlights bobbing in the darkness. The ground shook slightly as they approached, and they found a small spacecraft nestled in a makeshift clearing, steam and a faint light emanating from its hull. "Holy smokes, it's a real spaceship," Tom whispered, his face a mix of awe and caution. The hatch opened with a quiet hiss, and a figure emerged. Not human, but humanoid, with shimmering skin and large, luminescent eyes. The alien looked around, bewildered, then fixed her gaze on David and Tom. "Hello," David called out tentatively, taking a step forward. "We mean no harm." The alien watched them, her head tilting slightly, clearly trying to understand. David remembered the portable translator in his pocket and quickly typed in his greeting, holding it out towards her. The device converted his words, and the alien's face relaxed slightly. She spoke, her voice melodic and strange, and the translator crackled back to life. "Greetings. I am Elira. I seek refuge." Tom blinked in surprise, then nodded. "You're safe here, Elira. No one will harm you. Why are you here?" David asked, his curiosity piqued. "My journey was to escape," Elira explained through the translator. "I am pursued and cannot return home." David and Tom exchanged glances. This was beyond anything they'd expected to encounter on a quiet night in Eldridge. "We can offer you shelter," Tom said decisively. "Come with us. You can stay in my guest house for now." Elira nodded, a gesture that seemed universally understood. "I am grateful," she said. The three of them walked back to Tom's property, the alien princess flanked by her unexpected Earth protectors. As they walked, David tried to keep the conversation going to learn more about her. "So, Elira, where are you from? What's it like?" he asked, his academic curiosity overcoming his initial shock. "It is very different from Earth. Much larger, with vast seas and skies of amber," she described, her eyes distant with the memory. "But it is ruled by fear, and I could not stay." As they reached Tom's guest house, David helped her inside. The small but comfortable space was filled with books and model airplanes, a testament to Tom's interests. "This will be your space," Tom said, showing her around. "You can rest here. We'll figure out what to do in the morning." Elira sat down on the couch, looking around with a cautious appreciation. "Thank you, David." "Thank you, Tom. I am far from home, but here I feel a strange sense of peace." "We'll do our best to keep you safe," David reassured her, feeling a profound sense of responsibility for their otherworldly visitor. As they left her to rest, Tom clapped David on the shoulder. "Well, this is a first," he chuckled softly. "Hosting an alien princess. What are we getting ourselves into?" David smiled, looking back at the guest house. "I don't know, Tom, but I have a feeling it's going to be an incredible adventure." Together, they walked back to the main house under the starlit sky, each lost in thought about the extraordinary encounter and the bond of friendship and duty that was already forming between the Earthmen and their alien guest. The morning sun streamed through the curtains of Tom's guest house where Elira had spent the night. Outside, David and Tom discussed their next steps over cups of strong coffee. "She needs our help, Tom. We can't just turn our backs on her," David said, setting his mug down with a determined clank. Tom nodded, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "I agree, but we need to be smart about this. We don't know what kind of people are after her, or why. This could get bigger than we can handle." Just then, Elira emerged from the guest house, looking more composed but still out of place in her alien attire, which shimmered with the morning light. "Good morning, Elira. Did you sleep well?" David asked, greeting her with a warm smile. "Yes, thank you. Your planet's sun is very comforting," Elira replied, her voice calm. Tom pulled up a chair for her. "We were just talking about what to do next. We want to help you, but we need more information. Can you tell us more about who might be following you?" Sitting down, Elira looked between the two men. "My planet, Eridani, is controlled by a regime that demands conformity. I am next in line to rule, but I oppose their methods. Too restrictive, too cruel. That's why I had to leave." David leaned forward, intrigued. "And they followed you here?" "It is likely. They value control above all else. And my departure is a threat to their power," Elira explained. Tom exchanged a worried glance with David. "We need a plan to keep you safe, then." Maybe we should contact the authorities? Elira's eyes widened. No, that could bring unwanted attention. It is better if I stay hidden for now. David nodded. All right, then we keep this quiet. Tom, can we set up some kind of surveillance around your property? Just as a precaution. Already on it, Tom affirmed. I'll install some cameras today. We'll see everything that approaches. Thank you both for your protection, Elira said, her tone sincere. In return, I can offer knowledge from my world, technology beyond what Earth currently knows. Both men perked up at this. That could be incredibly beneficial, David mused. But let's focus on your safety first. The rest of the day was spent in preparation and planning. Tom set up security cameras while David worked with Elira, trying to learn more about her culture and technology. As they worked, David set up a whiteboard in the living room, jotting down everything Elira described. Her technology was fascinating, involving advanced energy systems and material science that could revolutionize industries on Earth. Elira, this is amazing, David said as he wrote furiously. This could help us solve so many of our environmental problems. Yes, I hope so. My world has technologies that harness the power of the natural elements without harm, Elira explained, guiding his hand to draw the schematics more accurately. Tom watched from the doorway, impressed. You're teaching us more than we could have imagined. As the sun set, they sat down for a meal, a mix of Earth food and some special dishes David had tried to prepare using descriptions from Elira. They laughed and shared stories, the tension of the situation momentarily forgotten. David, Tom, I am truly grateful for your help. I feel safe here with you, Elira admitted, her eyes reflecting the flicker of the candles on the table. We're glad to have you here, Elira. You're not just a guest. You're a friend now, Tom said warmly. David raised his glass. To new friends and new beginnings. They clinked glasses, the sound echoing lightly in the quiet of the evening. Despite the uncertainty of their situation, they had forged a bond that felt as though it could withstand any challenge. The following day, David and Tom decided to introduce Elira to some human customs, hoping it would help her blend in and understand Earth's quirks better. They started with something simple, breakfast at a nearby diner. All right, first lesson in Earth culture, breakfast food, David said with a grin as they settled into a booth at Sally's Diner. The old place had a homely feel, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh coffee. Elira glanced around, studying the scene. Food is highly valued here, she asked, her gaze shifting to a nearby table where a family laughed over a plate of pancakes. Yes, you could say that, Tom chuckled. In our culture, meals are social events, a chance to connect. And besides, you can't beat a good breakfast. Elira tilted her head thoughtfully. On Eridani, we eat very different things. Sustenance is more of a solitary activity. But I like this gathering. Just then, the waitress arrived. David ordered a variety of breakfast staples, pancakes, eggs, bacon, and a couple of mugs of coffee. Elira watched as the plates arrived. Her curiosity piqued. Start with the pancakes, David suggested, sliding a plate toward her. They're sweet, soft. We drizzle them with syrup. Elira took a careful bite, her eyes widening. This is delightful. We don't have anything like this. Tom laughed. That's just the beginning. Wait until you try the coffee. He handed her the mug, watching her expression as she took her first sip. She blinked and set the mug down quickly. It's very strong. That's part of its charm, David said, taking a big gulp. Gets you going in the morning. After breakfast, they walked through town. David showed Elira different places, a grocery store, the library, the park, each new sight bringing more questions. At the park, Elira stopped at the edge of a small pond, observing a flock of ducks gliding across the water. These creatures are peaceful, she noted. They are, David said, smiling. And people come here to relax, unwind. It's a place for thinking, talking, spending time with others. Elira watched the ducks, her expression reflective. On Eridani, we have similar places, but they are often structured. This seems more open, free. That's what we like about it, Tom said, watching her. No restrictions here. People do what they want. Live and let live. The three of them wandered down the path, sharing stories and laughing at the differences between Earth and Eridani customs. Elira seemed fascinated by every detail, asking questions that ranged from human philosophy to the mechanics of the park's water fountain. By midday, they headed back to Tom's place, where David set up an old chessboard in the living room. "All right, Elira, this is a game called chess. It's about strategy." Elira leaned forward, watching intently as David explained the rules. "So, each piece has its own movement and purpose?" "Exactly," Tom said, setting up his pieces on the other side of the board. "It's about thinking ahead, predicting what your opponent will do." Elira picked up a knight, examining it. "This is a fascinating concept. It mirrors tactical training on my world, but in a simpler form." David grinned. "Ready for a game, then?" They spent the afternoon in a series of chess matches, with Elira learning quickly and catching both men off guard with her knack for complex strategies. The laughter and camaraderie of the day made her feel less like an alien guest and more like one of their own. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Elira looked around the small living room and smiled. "Today, I felt more connected to your world. I understand you better." Tom clapped her on the shoulder. "Glad to hear it, Elira. We're glad to have you here." David nodded. "We'll get you through this." Together, Elira's smile widened, and for the first time, she looked as if she truly belonged. A few days after their exploration of town, David suggested a night outing to a secluded lake nearby. The idea was to introduce Elira to stargazing from Earth, a simple pleasure they hoped would give her a sense of calm. They arrived as dusk settled over the water, the evening sky just beginning to reveal its first stars. David spread a blanket out by the lake, and they settled in, leaning back and gazing up. "Your stars are so different," Elira said, studying the sky. "On Eridani, they form tight constellations, almost as if they're closer together." David smiled. "Each part of the universe has its own character. Our ancestors used these stars for guidance, even gave them stories and names. That one, for example, is Orion," he pointed, tracing the constellation in the air. Elira followed his gesture, her eyes lighting up. "So, they're your guides in a way." "Exactly," Tom added. "They're like old friends, always there, steady." The three of them sat in a comfortable silence, watching as the night deepened and more stars filled the sky. David glanced over at Elira, noticing the soft way the moonlight played across her features, highlighting her curiosity and vulnerability. "It must be hard," he ventured quietly, "leaving your world behind. Being here alone." Elira looked at him, a faint sadness in her eyes. "It is strange, yes. Eridani had its flaws, but it was my home. I didn't think I'd miss it until I came here. The quiet, the faces I knew, it's a loss." David reached out, a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone here. Tom and I, well, we're here for you, however we can be." Tom nodded, his face earnest. "You're part of the team now, Elira. We're in this together." Elira looked between them, her expression softening. "Thank you, both of you. Your kindness is unusual to me. On Eridani, people aren't often this open." David chuckled. "Maybe that's something we can teach you then." She smiled, a small but genuine expression, and shifted a little closer to him. "It's strange. I feel at peace here, with you. Like I don't have to hide so much." They stayed close, watching the stars in companionable silence. The stillness was interrupted only by the gentle sounds of the lake, the occasional rustling of leaves, and their quiet conversation. "David," Elira murmured after a while, "do you think I'll ever see Eridani again? My people?" David hesitated. "I don't know, but you'll have a life here, too, if you want it. A new start," Tom added. "And if they ever do come looking, well, they'll have to get through us first." Elira laughed softly. "You're both brave. I don't know if I deserve this loyalty." "Deserve's got nothing to do with it," Tom replied with a grin. "We like you, Elira. You've got guts. And, frankly, you've given us quite an adventure." David laughed, nudging Elira's shoulder playfully. "Plus, you're a fast learner. I'm almost worried you'll start beating me at chess soon." Elira raised an eyebrow, smiling. "I've been practicing in secret." The three of them laughed, their voices echoing softly across the lake. It was a night none of them would forget, a night when fears faded, and an unspoken bond deepened between them. Finally, as the temperature dipped and the sky grew dark, they stood up, gathering their things to head back. Walking side by side, they moved quietly through the trees, each lost in thoughts of friendship, of loyalty, and of belonging. Just before they reached the car, Elira turned to David, her face thoughtful. "Thank you, David. I may never truly belong here, but tonight I felt close to it." David met her gaze, reassuring warmth in his eyes. "Anytime, Elira. As long as you're here, you're with us." Together, they drove back, the night sky stretching endlessly above them, stars twinkling like silent witnesses to their growing connection. The days passed quickly, filled with a routine of shared meals, chess games, and long conversations. Elira grew more comfortable in their world, her laughter coming more easily, her curiosity ever keen. One quiet evening, David invited her to his small library, a room filled with shelves overflowing with books, maps, and curiosities collected over the years. "Thought you might find this interesting," he said, handing her an old, leather-bound book. "It's a collection of poetry. Some say you can understand a culture through its poetry." Elira turned the pages delicately, her fingers tracing the faded words. "The language here, it feels heavy, full of meaning," she murmured, her gaze intent on the verses. "Eridani's language is more structured, functional." David watched her, intrigued by how absorbed she was. "Words here hold weight. They're not just about communication. They're a way to express things we can't quite say out loud." Elira looked up at him, her large, luminous eyes meeting his. "Things like," she asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. He hesitated, feeling his pulse quicken under her gaze. "Like how we feel," he replied, stepping a little closer. "Words can reveal things we hide, even from ourselves." Elira studied him intently, her face unreadable. "Then what do you feel, David? What would you say?" Caught off guard, David managed a slight laugh, his nerves evident. "Well, that's a dangerous question." "Why?" she asked, taking a step closer, close enough that he could feel her presence, her gaze searching his. "Is there something you would hide from me?" David looked at her, all pretense of lightheartedness gone. "Maybe I would," he said quietly, feeling his heart beat faster. Her gaze softened, and she reached out, her hand lightly touching his arm. "David, I have never felt so close to anyone before. Not on my world, and certainly not since I came here." Their silence was thick with unspoken words, and in that moment, it was as if everything they'd shared led to this. Slowly, David lifted a hand to her face, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Elira closed her eyes at his touch, a slight tremble running through her. "Elira," he began, barely above a whisper. "Yes," she murmured, opening her eyes to meet his. There was a warmth in her gaze, a curiosity and vulnerability he'd rarely seen. Without another word, he leaned in, and their lips met, tentative at first, a gentle exploration. Elira responded, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, pulling him closer as their kiss deepened. She felt both delicate and strong, her presence like a melody he'd never known but instinctively understood. They parted briefly, their foreheads resting together, both breathing heavily. Elira's hand slipped to his cheek, her fingers warm and steady. "I never thought I would feel this," she whispered. "Not here, not with anyone." David smiled, brushing his thumb along her jawline. "Me neither." They kissed again, the room fading away, leaving only the warmth of their shared embrace, the softness of her touch, and the feeling of something precious and rare sparking between them. It was a moment without words, a shared understanding that no explanation could capture. As the night deepened, they sat together, talking quietly, hands entwined, sharing secrets, dreams, and laughter, as if time itself had bent to give them this one perfect night. The next morning, as sunlight crept through the blinds, David and Elira sat together in Tom's kitchen, sipping coffee. Tom joined them, eyeing them with a hint of curiosity. "You both seem different this morning," he noted, glancing from one to the other. David shifted, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Just a good night," he replied, shooting a quick look at Elira, who returned it with a soft smile. Tom raised an eyebrow, clearly catching on, but keeping his thoughts to himself. "Well, as long as everyone's happy." Elira's face softened, but then her gaze grew serious. "David, Tom, I feel I must share something with you," she began hesitantly. "My escape was not without risk. If my people find me here, it could bring you danger." David reached over, touching her hand reassuringly. "Elira, we're here for you, whatever happens." "We knew the risks." Tom nodded, his voice steady. "Exactly. We knew what we were getting into. But maybe we should have some sort of backup plan." Elira looked down, clearly troubled. "There is a way, perhaps, but it would require that I make contact with someone from my world. Someone who would be willing to help and not betray my location." David tensed. "That sounds risky, Elira. Are you sure there's no other way?" She nodded, her expression serious. "I don't want to endanger you both. I would rather leave than put you at risk." Tom shook his head. "Leaving isn't an option. Not for any of us. We'll find a way to keep you safe without you having to disappear." A silence settled between them, each lost in thought. David finally broke it, looking at Elira with a soft, determined expression. "We'll work it out. Together. But you're not going anywhere unless it's your choice." Elira's gaze softened, gratitude and something deeper in her eyes. "You both have shown me kindness that I could never have expected." I don't want to leave." Tom clapped David on the shoulder. "Well, looks like we're all in this then. No one's going anywhere." He turned to Elira, giving her a reassuring grin. "You've got yourself a team, and we're not about to abandon ship." Elira's face relaxed, a small smile breaking through her worry. "Then I suppose we move forward with trust, and I'll do my best to keep both of you out of danger." David squeezed her hand, a smile forming. "We're stronger together." Tom nodded in agreement, glancing at both of them with a glint of amusement. "Then let's get through this like we get through everything else, with a plan, some grit, and maybe a bit of luck." The three exchanged a determined look, a renewed understanding solidifying their bond. As they talked through ideas for added precautions, the air felt lighter, their fears shared, their path forward clearer. A week had passed since Elira's confession about the risks of her presence, and the small team had done all they could to create a protective shield around her. Tom had set up extra security cameras around the property, and David spent late nights devising escape routes and plans should they ever need them. The tension, however, was still there, a weight they each felt as the days wore on. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Elira broke the silence. "David, Tom, I've been thinking," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "Maybe it would be better if I tried to integrate further into human society. To be less of a guest, more ordinary." Tom looked at her thoughtfully. "You mean blend in like one of us?" "Yes," she replied, nodding. "Maybe if I learn more, take on aspects of Earth life, I can pass unnoticed." David scratched his chin, considering. "It could work, Elira, but it would mean a lot of changes. You'd need a new identity, a story." Tom leaned forward. "And it wouldn't be easy. People might still notice things, but with the right backstory, we might pull it off." Elira's face brightened with determination. "Then let's do it. I'm ready to take that leap. I trust you both." They spent the evening hashing out details. Tom suggested she take up a local identity, perhaps as a foreign scholar, someone who could explain away her unusual demeanor and knowledge. David proposed she could work remotely, teaching languages or acting as a research consultant. As they discussed, a palpable sense of relief settled over them. Each had a part in this new story they were crafting. By the time the stars appeared, they decided on a new name for Elira. She would go by Alina Ryder, a name they felt would help her blend in with the locals. The next morning, David took Elira into town for the first time under her new identity. She wore a simple dress and a scarf to cover her iridescent hair, looking surprisingly human. "How do I look?" she asked, glancing nervously at her reflection in the car window. David smiled, giving her an approving nod. "You look perfect. No one would guess you're from another world." They wandered through the town, stopping at various shops, introducing Alina to the people David knew. Tom had suggested they start with a small circle, people they trusted. The librarian, Mrs. Grayson, gave Alina a welcoming smile and quickly took to her foreign scholar story, asking about her studies and interest in Earth's languages. Later, as they sat in a cozy cafe, Elira took David's hand across the table. "This life you're giving me, it feels like a second chance. I didn't expect to feel at home here." David squeezed her hand, his gaze warm. "You belong here as much as anyone, Elira. Alina." He corrected himself, grinning. "We're just giving you the place you've already earned." Tom joined them that evening, bringing a bottle of wine to celebrate. "To Alina Ryder, our new town scholar," he toasted, raising his glass. They laughed, clinking their glasses together, and Elira's eyes shone with gratitude and joy. "I'm more grateful than you know. I feel alive again." David and Tom exchanged a smile. "We're just glad you're here," Tom said, his tone genuine. As the night wore on, they talked about their plans, laughing over the smallest details, but each knowing that Elira's integration was their leap of faith, a step into a new life that they would face together. Several weeks passed, and Elira, now Alina Ryder to everyone in town, was settling into her new life. She had started helping out at the local library, working with Mrs. Grayson, who had taken a shine to the foreign scholar and her keen interest in Earth's languages. Tom and David were both impressed with how naturally she blended in, picking up local phrases and customs as if she'd always lived among them. One evening, the three of them sat on Tom's back porch, watching the sun set over the hills. Tom poured them each a glass of whiskey, and they relaxed, sharing stories and laughter. "So, how's life as our resident scholar?" Tom asked, a teasing smile playing on his lips. Alina laughed. "Well, Mrs. Grayson has given me a stack of novels to read. She insists it will improve my understanding of human nature." She smiled, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "Apparently, romance novels are a staple of Earth's culture." David chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "She's not wrong, you know. It's part of the cultural education, Alina." Alina smirked. "I suppose I'll have to read them then, if only to keep up with you two." They all laughed, the comfortable camaraderie filling the quiet evening air. Tom glanced at David, then back at Alina, a hint of something more serious in his expression. "I have to say, I never thought we'd get to this point. There was a time I worried you'd have to leave us, or that we'd all end up on some government radar." Alina nodded, her face turning reflective. "I worried too, but I don't think I ever truly wanted to leave. Here I feel like I found a purpose, a place where I belong, even if it's not my world." David reached over, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "You're one of us now, Alina. We couldn't imagine this place without you." Alina smiled, her gaze warm. "Thank you, David. And you, Tom, for everything." Tom lifted his glass in a toast. "To Alina Ryder, the finest scholar Eldridge has ever seen, and our good friend." They clinked glasses, laughter filling the air once more. As the stars began to appear overhead, David pointed out constellations, sharing stories of the night sky with Alina, who listened intently, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the starlight. After a while, Alina looked up, her eyes reflecting the stars. "Back on Eridani, we had stories about the stars too. But here, they seemed different, warmer, somehow." David glanced at her, a smile spreading across his face. "Maybe that's because you're seeing them through new eyes." She nodded, thoughtful. "Perhaps. Or maybe I just needed to find a place where I could see them this way." Tom cleared his throat, a mischievous grin forming. "All right, enough stargazing for one night. Who's up for a game of chess?" David laughed. "You're just trying to redeem yourself after the last beating Alina gave you." Alina smirked. "I have learned well from both of you. Don't think I'll go easy." They moved inside, setting up the chessboard on the living room table. The friendly banter continued as they took turns playing, the atmosphere light and full of warmth. As the night wore on and the chess pieces were put away, David and Alina found themselves sitting together on the couch, a comfortable silence between them. Tom had already retired to his room, leaving them alone. "David," Alina said softly, looking up at him, "I found more here than I ever expected." He smiled, his gaze steady. "We're all better for having you here, Alina." They stayed like that, close and content, the journey they'd shared feeling like the beginning of something lasting, something rooted in friendship, trust, and a newfound sense of belonging. For the first time in a long time, Alina felt entirely at peace, surrounded by friends who had become family and a place she could now call home.